Do you feel that in a time when we are more connected than ever, we are drifting away from real human connection, especially to ourselves? I do. Hi, I'm Leticia Latino, and I want to invite you to join me and my very inspiring guests in exploring ways to reconnect to your essence, to your definite purpose, to what makes you tick. Are you ready? Hello, everybody. Welcome to a new episode of Back to Basics, Reconnecting to the Essence of You. I have a super special guest today. He's Chris Watson. He's a highly esteemed and acclaimed legal expert who is passionate about digital transformation, particularly digital identity and the evolving landscape of digital infrastructure funding. A partner at CMS UK, his outstanding contributions to law have earned him broad recognition, such as being named as one of the leading lawyers in the telecommunications in the Legal 500 Hall of Fame and included in the Who's Who Legal Thought Leaders Global Elite list. In addition to his legal profession, Chris is an award-winning winemaker and holds the highest title, Pilier, afforded within the winemaking community. In 2002, his domain Watson won a médaille d'argent in French for second best independent grower of Chablis. Hello, Chris, and welcome to Back to Basics.
Well, hello, and thank you so much for having me.
Well, I'm beyond excited, and I'm going to give the full disclosure also because I'm with a lawyer you are probably in over 280 episodes, I've only interviewed maybe 5 people from my own industry. And people that listen to the podcast know I don't interview people in telecom, right. Just precisely because I just want to make it a point that this has nothing to do with my job, but it's more about inspiring conversations. And when we met, probably now 3-4 years ago, I forget. Mm-hmm. We had the most inspiring conversation about wine, everything, life. And from that moment, I say, I would love to have Chris on the show. And I'm so happy that it's happening today.
I love that conversation, and I'm really happy to be here. I still remember that conversation. It was we covered everything in the world. It was all-encompassing and warm and very special.
Well, likewise. And so I know that if you inspire me, I know you would inspire my audience. And mostly because you're an extremely successful human being that obviously is passionate about your job, but you're a family man. You are one of the few that I know that have baked its passions in life. So this interview always starts with what was young Chris passionate about when you were growing up. If you can share a little bit about your origin story and if you ever dreamt about being a lawyer or if that just happened.
I was passionate about everything, probably except becoming a lawyer. I was passionate about doing things with my hands. I'm a very plastic person. I was brought up in the Middle East, in Iran, where I lived in the wildest parts where have extraordinary birds and 6,000-year-old cities built into dams in the river. So I lived in a very old, deep-rooted civilization with so many complexities. And I was educated by an American teacher in Iran and brought up by an Iranian couple who looked after me while my parents were working. So I had a very broad upbringing, which was also, among other things, in 2 languages. And so I learned very early on there is not only one way to see things. In fact, everything is relative. You can see everything from a number of perspectives. And if you get that idea early, and it helps you a lot in certain ways of thinking as you get older. And so my earliest recollections are really of things just having 2 ways of looking at things, and of my dog and my 2 cats. And birds.
Wow, that's fascinating. I knew I'm going to learn so much about you. So, wow, growing up in Iran, is there anything, because I always like to ask that, you would like to share in terms of misconception, or maybe when people say, well, you grew up in Iran, that there's something that maybe the world gets wrong about that part of the world and being raised there?
I knew from my earliest days that Iran is one of the oldest and greatest civilizations in the world. It goes back 6,000 years. It has great poets, it has great philosophers, it has great mathematicians, it has great thinkers, it has great cooks. It has great recipes. It's its own really strong cuisine, which is not the same as Arabic cuisine or Lebanese cuisine. It has its own very different fire-based religion. It is different from everywhere else. It is itself. And I learned that deserves respect, and it's important to understand.
That's beautiful. And so definitely I can see where the passion starts happening with, the working with your hands and all that. But at some point, and we have young audience, and my message here is no matter what you choose to do as your profession, it doesn't have to define you. But at some point you decided, well, I'm going to go become a lawyer. And if you can share a little bit of that process, and then how because you have a very successful, at least in telecom, everybody knows who you are, and you've made some of the most impactful deals. You're big on innovation, regulatory innovation. You're doing a lot of good also with a degree such a law. A lot of people thinking of us.
I think it began because from starting with two languages, I became aware of the complexity and the power of words, and that different languages actually are not just different languages, they are different ways of thinking. Every language brings with it its own way of seeing the world and of expressing ideas. And sometimes ideas come into your mind which can not easily be expressed in one language, but work really well in another. And from that, you realize that things are not as simple as they seem, and that there are many ways to understand things. And that meant that for me, international law and comparative law through languages, but also just through working on cross-border deals and between countries, was an area where I could really add value and make things happen. And really, that's the most important thing that I feel that I have done. I've worked in international deals and tried to help. And I can see when two parties to something are not understanding each other. I can hear it, I can feel it. And that comes, I think, from that very early upbringing in two languages, that you sense when there is not an understanding. You work out a way in which you can help it to work out, and you can do comparative law. So that's work, for example, that I did with the World Bank in relation to digital identity, where there are international norms of data protection and digital security, and yet they have to fit into local political and constitutional systems in multiple countries. And I've worked now in 4 or 5 languages to work on digital identity for the World Bank in helping to produce and draft systems and legal systems in countries which allow for digital inclusion, which is very important to me, the digital inclusion through creating systems of trust. And the other thing about language is language breeds trust. If you can speak to someone in their language, you can get trust. If you're working in a different language, it's much more difficult. And so my training in languages, I studied language at the university, not law, has been a fundamental part of how I see the world and work as an international lawyer.
I love that. And I think that we share that in common. Like, I don't know. I don't speak as many as you do. And when I speak French with you, I pale because yours is perfect. But I have that fascination exactly as you described. So I'm glad you mentioned that, because when I mentor young people and they tell me maybe they want to go and study languages, I say languages you can always do on the side, almost, like if you want. And you can build upon any other career you have just by being curious about languages. So I'm not saying don't study that, but if there's other ways that you can really explore that, and nothing like conversing with somebody in their own language, even if yours is not perfect.
Absolutely. And anybody who says, oh, no, it doesn't matter, Google Translate will do it for you, has completely missed the point.
Absolutely beautiful. So then, anything, I know we share a world of telecom, and you talk about digital literacy and equity, and I'm also very involved. I think we are living in a moment where we can all make more of an impact that we care to admit, if we are curious about to say, how can I contribute? And even a small contribution, even a small committee, even being part of any initiative that can raise awareness about these problems, because we are living like as parents, right? I have two little ones, and everybody say, "Oh, the phone and all that." Yeah, but that's part of their own journey and their own society that they have had to leave. What's your take on that? I mean, being that you're in all this regulatory world, and what do we do with the young people and their access to internet and
It's
devices?
very, very difficult. You can't hold them back 25 or 50 years. You can't force your children to live in your past. And my past is digital, but my present is utterly digital. I am I use my device for everything. It's become much of my interface with the world. And so I recognize that I'm, if you want, a really bad example to my children, or I'm a really good example, because my device leverages and empowers me. I'm not its slave. It is my slave, but it really empowers me to achieve a lot more than I otherwise could. Especially as my memory gets a bit vague, so I really find it useful to have something which reminds me of stuff. But genuinely, if your mind is wide ranging, then digital devices can help you to explore and find things. And actually, I remember one of the biggest compliments anybody ever gave to me was in 2004, when one of my young associates said he's incredibly good at Google searches, because these are special human skills, which is working with technology. And if you can master the technology and really make it work for you better, then you can do better than other people. It doesn't raise all boats to the same level. You need to be able to master these techniques and these technologies. And my daughter, who's a digital analyst at Bloomberg, is using her skills to take on process data to service the needs of the company and help the company. So, these are not the same skills for everybody. Just because they seem to be in a software package doesn't mean you can't be better or worse at them.
Powerful. Definitely powerful. And the fact that we're even doing a podcast, I mean, this was before our time too. Like I think that there's a generation, and I call it mine, but probably, where we didn't have the same tools. Like I remember the first time I surfed the web, and I couldn't even fathom what surfing the web was. But a friend of mine said, "I'm going to surf the web tonight." And I'm like, "Oh." And so we also have had to adapt to something. And I really am with you with saying your past cannot define the future, and every generation has different challenges, and I think we are also doing them a disservice by making them afraid of technology.
Yeah, and just to take it further, my oldest son has launched a business where I'm supporting him and I'm loving him and loving what he's doing, but I see that the way that his business is projecting itself electronically is, for me, extraordinary. I could never know how to do that. And he's decided that the way that the business has to go forward is through the use of real experts in this space. And I see what they do, and I just hold my hands up in wonderment at how effective they are and what results they can deliver. I can see it, I can understand it. I wouldn't know how to do it, because that isn't my field, but it is their field. And things are moving forward. This is real progress.
I love that. And I love you brought that in, because, of course, I want to talk about winemaking. And I know now this is where all intertwines, because you've had the opportunity also to even start working a little bit with your son in his venture. And then, it's becoming even family intertwined. So tell me about I know you were living in France, and you've lived all over the world at this point, probably. And but you are a successful lawyer, and at some point you decide to buy, a land and to make a winery. So I just would love for you to take us through that, because I know some people have that passion. I want to do. You're living the dream of many successful business people, and especially successful business people that say, "Well, when I make it, I'm going to go do this." And winemaking is probably on top of list, including for me.
Well, the main thing, there are two important things. So one is, I don't believe in waiting. I never put it off. If I can do it, I do it now. And I became a barrister in Paris. Je suis avocat à la cour à Paris in 1987, I moved to Paris, and I worked there for quite a long time. I got to know some friends there, and I was introduced to some friends there by a person I knew in London, Mark Kendrick. And he said, you need to meet this guy. And I met this Parisian barrister who turned out that he was a really keen trout fisherman like me. And so we went and fished, and we went around the whole of rural France and caught fish or didn't catch fish in really beautiful places. And I met him and all his friends, and we'd go and eat, and we'd go and drink, and we'd do crazy things in the countryside. And I got to know them all for 2 or 3 years. And in the end, they said to me, Chris, it's really odd because you are, at heart, you are a Burgundian. You are from Burgundy. You are unlucky because you were born in England, but it doesn't matter. We can sort that out for you, because we're going to find you some land, and you can clear the land, and you can turn it into a vineyard, and you can plant some vines, and that way you'll become the Burgundian that you are at heart. And because they were very proud Burgundians, they weren't going to give me any old piece of land. They took a long time to find a really good piece of land which hadn't been planted for 100 years. It had a wood on it with huge trees. I mean, firewood for decades. And I had to clear the land and get permission and battle French bureaucracy and take on all the provisions that are meant to stop external profiteers from buying vineyards in Burgundy. And with Jean-Paul's help, I took it all on, and I planted these vineyards. And I planted them like a madman because I was determined they'd be the best possible quality, regardless almost of the cost or the risk. And so I did that. And I found a local farmer who understood my madness and said, well, yes, it is crazy, and there are huge risks. And you've planted it much more expensive than I would, but I would really like to make your wine. And so that's how I got the silver medal the first year, because he was so passionate about my passion. We shared our passion, and passion just communicates itself like that. And I'm quite a passionate person for many things. And this communicated itself, and it's why I've been accepted by the French, who are like you. They are very passionate people, and they respect and understand passion. They can see it. And if it isn't there, they don't respect you so much.
Yes, having lived in France, I know exactly what you mean, and it's a great honor that they also bestowed upon you this pilier. It's because that's like a pillar, that's like a base, that's a representation. It's just such a incredible recognition for, as you say, for a foreigner, but. I don't know, but I'm a Catholic. We don't believe in afterlife, but I do believe that we maybe have lived in places and that connection. I don't know why, but there's places that connect with us in a special way. And then the fact that you recognize that and you said, let's do this here is incredible.
They recognized it as well. They said, you are a Burgundian. You are from here. And so, as you put it, I don't know about another life, but in some ways, my soul is from Burgundy.
Beautiful. And that's something that, because then you share with me, and this came up about how you went back to France and to your domain, to land, and even your family has fond memories, which is kind of my parents taking us to Sicily every year and recognizing that's
your
kind of
house, yes.
Yes, and that's how really what gave name to this podcast is Back to Basics, because that's my Back to Basics place. When I think of how I feel connected to the land, to the heritage, to why I am here, that's the place. And I, even in doing a little research and reading about your winery, I feel that you have transmitted that to your family and your kids, that when they're there, they feel also that same connection that you are explaining.
They both do. Both my older two, Emma and Alex, were born in Paris, and they came down and made wine harvests with me from when they were 4 and 2 years old, and kept on for a long time afterwards, because I did all my own wine harvests by hand in the early days. These days I can't. I now have 4 vineyards, and there's too much for us to do. But also, after a certain point, if you go to machine harvesting, you have to put the grapes at a different level, and you can no longer cut them by hand. So there's a switch over. So we no longer do that, but they did that, and they have such strong memories of that, which is one of the reasons why they decided. A lot of families would love nothing more than for their children to take over their business and take it forward. And what I had was, instead, that two oldest children decided they wanted to take a part of the business to another level above and create something new from it, which is also very good because they can take on the existing business of making wine, but they've taken on this business as well of elaborating a gin from the wine and the products of the vineyard. And they based it on the spirit of the wine and the idea, the philosophy of Chablis and what Chablis is, which is a mineral, taut, tense, slightly acid but floral, powerful wine, which lasts a long time. And they've decided, okay, that can work. That can be translated into a different language, which is from wine into language of spirits.
Mm. And I love that. As a family, as somebody working in the family business, that's something we connected. And so since you mentioned, yeah. And I remember us having a conversation, so I'm going to say that about branding, and you shared kind of what you were saying, like, I don't know how to make this, like more social and more visible. And then I maybe should ask my kids. They're really good at that in different generation. And then you share that your daughter has a big following. And I say, oh, well, ask her to help her with that, to help me with that. And then we discover our daughters are named the same, Emma.
Yes.
So, this is an interview about you, but obviously having a famous daughter, I'm sure that brought a lot of complexities also in the parenthood. We can have a different episode on probably just that.
With great pleasure.
Yes, but I see I love the siblings, the two oldest, and I know you have, in total 5 children.
I do.
And I can see, for what I've read, that everybody is very driven. And I see that in what you're saying. They could not take upon anybody else, but what's available, at least with the gene that the two eldest have created, they are very big on sustainability, which I was very happy to read about. And they're really creating a brand that encompasses, what the most socially conscious let's say entrepreneurs are trying to do, and with such an amazing platform that they have, I think it's just very inspiring.
I have been amazed by each of them brings an absolute creativity to what they do. They look at it afresh. They think, we're starting from zero. I have no preconceptions. So Emma, when designing the cake, the boxes for the wine, for example, decided this year, well, it's sustainable. We make it from recyclable material. It's made from mushroom compost on the outside, yes, and the sleeve on the outside. But that outside, if you had cutouts in it, you could pull away the cutouts and put a candle in the middle. It would be a Christmas candle and cast reflections on the wall. Wow. And the cutouts you could tie strings to, and you hang them on your Christmas tree. And so that's kind of sustainable and creative, and taking the idea that, yes, it's the packaging of a gin bottle, but it can be a lot more than that. Or Alex decided, okay, well, we're going to use, for the botanicals of the gin, we're going to use the grape skins that Dad throws away.
Wow.
We're going to use the stones on the top of the vineyard to crush and create the minerality and the saltiness, which are distinctive of Chablis particularly. We're going to macerate those in alcohol and use that to give it the saltiness and the tautness and the tenseness of a great wine. So each of them is just quite radical in what they do. And I am amazed and proud when I see that, because one thing you cannot teach your children is to be radical, because if you taught them, it wouldn't be radical. They just are.
I love that. I love that. This is just so rich in everything, because the whole point of why I thought you would be a great guest is like to show and to be a testament of you can really create anything you want. And I love your statement, I don't believe in waiting. So anybody out there with a good idea, just, look where everything takes you. And your winery even made a an award. He received an award for the winemaking. So what do you want to share about that? Can the wine be purchased everywhere? I'm sure people are going to be looking into like, okay, how do we get, and also the gin, I think the name is Rene?
She is Rene. Which is
Rene.
really clever. I mean, it's Alex devised the name. But I'm a French graduate. I'm bilingual in French. And he didn't ask me about the name of the gin. He just chose the right French word. He didn't ask me. He just came up with this word. Rene is be reborn. It's it's a subjunctive of a deponent verb, to be absolutely clear about it. I worked it out one day. It means be reborn. And what he is saying is, to my wine, be reborn in this gin.
Wow, that gives me goosebumps. That's amazing.
Renacer. And
Renacer.
Renacer, and the imperative is the order, be reborn.
Yes.
And he did that. And that's a lot of what is going on there. It is Emma's emphasis on sustainability, but it's a mixture because it's also the land expresses itself in many ways. And I love being in contact with the land and the non-loyally feelings that I get from making a wine and owning the land and having created the vine structure that grows upon it is really fulfilling. I love that. And so the idea that he and Emma both took it on themselves to take it forward was wonderful.
Sounds that way. Do the lawyer and the winemaker and the fisherman in you ever get in conflict of like, how do you want to spend your time? And let's call it that crazy word they call balance, because you seem to have it all in the sense. And I follow your post. Your posts are my back to basics because I see the beautiful pictures you post and they're just nature and they're relaxing by definition. So thank you for that. But do you ever get in conflict with all these things you're passionate about?
No. The at once, or 4 lives at once. And it is trying to juggle them together. I normally manage. I find a way to keep the plates spinning or the candles burning. And I sleep very little sometimes. And I run at a huge pace a lot of the time. But I have a lot of energy. And so I'm a kind of extrovert who is driven by encounters and events. And so the more that goes on, the more energy I have. So until that runs out, I am really a big one for doing it now, because if you wait, it probably won't happen.
That is so good. That if it was Oprah, I would say that's a tweetable moment. Because the fact that you say I'm an extrovert driven by encounters and you have the energy is one of the things, and I'm sure probably you get asked this, I get asked this, and I see myself a little bit in that is, how do you get so much energy for this? And people think you're on focus. The people sometimes say, like, I've been accused of being on focus, of being all over the place, but it just comes natural, like, right? I don't know. That's why sometimes I get like, am I crazy?
We're the same. That's why we recognize each other.
Yeah, and so it brings me a little bit of peace when I look up to say, okay, I'm not crazy, because people want a tangible explanation where the energy comes from, and it's just, I always say I shouldn't even get the credit because it comes natural, and I think it's what you said, when you're passionate about what you're doing, it's just an unlimited amount that you can tap into.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, I'm not crazy. That's good. So, Chris, the one thing, and I could talk forever, but the one thing I also very grateful for as a woman in telecommunications is that, without men that recognize that we are a better industry when we work together, it's very challenging because it's a male-dominated industry. And I'm part of the Global Telecom Women's Network, and this is a group that CMS and yourself have always supported very much. So I never want to intertwine, but I would remiss it to say thank you on behalf of all the women and all the executives that need champs, that need advocates, that need sponsors that help us, get to the next level. And I know going back to your children. I mean, I know the Emma, who is obviously more on the public life, she's a UN ambassador. I mean, she is doing things to also help advance these important causes. And I mean, they say the apple doesn't fall away from the tree, but I know this is something you're very active on. And I want to thank you on behalf of our industry, if anything.
I don't feel I've done anything except what is natural, what is right.
Well, that's beautiful. So, on that note, I always ask: are there any activities, initiatives for Chris Watson going on that we haven't discussed that you want to bring up to light? Anything you want to share, or simply, everything, the wine, the law, and the family?
Well, there is more because I have an ecological side to me. I am involved in the life of fish in wild waters, and I am a big partisan of keeping waters clean and pure for people to be in, so it's safe, and for fish to be in where they can live. So I'm a big supporter of that, and it obviously feeds into wine and gin and recycling and clean living. That's very important. I'm also a big bird fan. I adore birds. My favorite birds are ducks and owls, and I watch them. I can recognize them. I will listen to them. I will follow them about a bit without wanting to annoy them. And I'm a huge fan of birds and water birds and night birds. Those are and music. Bach and blues are my two big things. Bach speaks of a world of, for me, a mix of order and emotion and wonderment. And I am more of a Renaissance person than an age of romanticism person. So I go back to 300 or 400 years for choice. And so the music from that time and the writing from that time is what I studied along with humanism. So I have Enlightenment and humanism as my drivers. When I studied languages, I studied Voltaire and Sartre and Camus. And those are the big formative influences in my philosophy and my approach to life. And I realize that every day I'm living out the lessons I learned in literature class when I was 16.
That's amazing. What an answer. And it's like I'm supposed to ask, what makes you tick at the end of the interview? It's like, I got all these things, incredible. Humanism and enlightenment. I love it. Well, you're definitely going to come across probably one of the most cultured guests, because that's why we can talk about everything. I just feel that the knowledge is unlimited.
Yeah, we've had some really good talks. And I sense that with you, the whole field is open. We can just talk about anything.
Yes, absolutely. And for that, I thank you, because I know that the field has been open for many that are going to listen to this interview. And you've inspired me to even go back to my books, to my humanistic books, and see what can I grab. Because that's another back to basics. Like, the knowledge is there. When the student is ready, the knowledge shows up. And so I'm sure you can plant that in many.
For me, one of the wonders is that things I learned when I was 16 come to life now.
That's probably how God or the universe or the higher force designed it, right? To give us, now we know we're getting a little older when a lot of things made sense that they didn't before.
Absolutely. Yeah, you don't necessarily fully understand them when you learn them, but life gives you the meaning.
Well, and that's why the journey is so exciting. So thank you so much, Chris. I am particularly happy at the end of this interview, because normally I see fascinating people. I say, well, I'm probably never going to talk to them again. I'm happy. I know that I will, God willing, get to talk to you again. And I value and appreciate everything you do and the person you are. You're an inspiration.
I could only reflect that back to you. It has been so lovely to speak to you, and you have brought out so you make me feel so rich and happy. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. And to everybody out there, I am sure you enjoyed this one. And I wait for you on the next episode of Back to Basics. Bye-bye. You've been listening to Back to Basics. You can follow us on Instagram and Facebook. If you haven't yet, subscribe, rate, and review this podcast on Apple Podcast or any of your favorite streaming platforms. This is the best gift you can give us. Join me next week for another Back to Basics conversation. And if you want to find out about other exciting things I'm working on, visit leticialatino.com. Thank you, and until the next time.